find myself when I'm in conversations with family members or even just thinking on my own about my own stuff, when I start to get deep into topics and trying to kind of break them down and understand them almost from a little bit of like a systems thinking approach or just the approach that we would talk about of really trying to understand your objective and what you're doing and, trying to problem solve or get closer to an objective truth. I found myself coming back, first of all, starting with the kind of why concept, right? I talk about it with my son. It's kind of a cliched thing. Just keep asking why, right? Root cause type analysis, just keep asking the whys. And I think that's important, and I think that's good. And I think up to this point, I've thought of it in a way of, I guess, kind of linear, maybe is a way to think about it, or almost like single dimensional, where you ask why, and you keep asking why until you get to what you feel is the root of the issue. But it's a very, again, kind of a linear single dimension process that you do it. And the exercise of it alone is extremely valuable. And I believe that for various reasons I've said in the past. It makes you think more, makes you challenge your thoughts. It makes you think deeper about things. But what I found is in certain instances, again, particularly when you're getting kind of deep into your own identity or your own kind of psyche, it could start to feel like it stalls out a little bit. Sometimes you feel like you hit a root cause. You hit a stopping point for a why because you've come up with some really kind of rational explanation that you have relative, high degree of certainty that it's true. And it makes sense. It all kind of fits as kind of a cohesive narrative, which I know, we value. You hit a point like that and you stop. Typically, your mind kind of shuts off in that regard and says, okay, you've gotten there. If you're in a conversation with somebody, you feel like you've had a breakthrough or an insight, or at least, again, a stopping point to some extent. But what I find is there's usually like a next level why. It almost adds another dimension to it. So it's not just another why in the root cause chain. You may have hit that, but there becomes this next level component to it where once you recognize whatever the root cause why is, and I'll give an example of this in a second to try and make it real. Once you recognize that and you don't do anything about it, well, now you have a new why to answer. And it's kind of a next level of why, in that why would it be true that you would know this is the thing stopping you? You're fully aware of it, but you're not taking any action to address it, or you're not accounting for that in any way, right? It's a bit of a paradox. Because if you're mentally sophisticated enough to get to that root cause and identify that it exists, in theory, you should be able to go to that next step. Now, that can be extremely difficult to do. That can take a high degree of mental toughness to push past kind of a root cause type thing and get to that next level why. Totally get that. The idea of this is you have to ask the question though. You have to recognize that next level why is there and at least start asking the question or start to work to answer the question. And see where that goes. That might be a long journey in and of itself to get to the answer, to have the toughness to get to it, and then actually take some action around it, right? That could be a process in and of itself. But I think the acknowledgement of it is really key. So for example, I'll give an example that I've talked about recently in videos. Me from kind of a career perspective and a purpose of life perspective. This stuff that I'm doing with these videos is something that I'm obviously very passionate about. I'm dedicating a lot of time to. And ideally, this would be the thing I would be predominantly doing with my life, aside from family and other things. But from like a career perspective, from a work perspective, this would be it. If I could make enough money doing something like this, I would, in a second, I would go do that. And I would be, I believe, much happier, much more fulfilled. My family life would be better. It would be objectively a good thing, a net positive thing. And based on all the analysis I've done and thought through, which there's always more you could do, I believe that to be true, as certain as I can be about anything. So you start going through the whys, like, well, why aren't you doing it? Why are you still staying at your job? And you eventually go through and you hit a certain path and you say, whatever it is, given a family situation and the money that I need, I can't, quit my job. I still need that money. Or maybe there's a degree of laziness involved, which I've talked about from you before, where it's just, I know the work it's going to take to really do it, to get that income coming from another area, to really build something like this. It's not as easy as just having a job at a company and kind of working your hours. So maybe it's some laziness around it, right? Let's assume that's the case. I hit that root cause and I say, okay, that's it. Again, for a lot of people, you'd stop there and say, okay, maybe it's not for me, maybe it's whatever. But I think you have to go to that next level why. And again, say, well, if you know that to be true and you know that's illogical, right? Because in the long term, you'll be happier, you'll be better off if you invest the time and the effort up front. Why would you not be taking steps towards that? Almost everything you're doing minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, from a career perspective is illogical. It all becomes that. You're acting completely illogical. And why you would allow that to happen, again, is that next level why you have to answer and kind of push through. And you can see this in all different types of scenarios, right, that come up. It could be your views on a certain topic, your view of if the economy should open back up with coronavirus, whatever it is, you can kind of go through and get to a why where you say, okay, I know why I'm disagreeing with this other person and fighting with them because I have this belief about this topic. But then there's still that next level why of like, okay, well, if you know why you have that belief and you understand it to a better extent, why are you still not able to have a civil conversation with somebody? Why are you still arguing, right? That truth should bring you to a place where it's a better discussion or what have you. Again, all different ways you can look at it. But what I wanted to do a little bit as somewhat of a thought exercise on this next level why is connected to the last video I made in kind of a short way. Maybe I'll expand on it later. But in the last video I made, I was talking about politics in the country. And I was talking about could we really be this divided? This idea that you look at our country and every significant topic we seem to completely disagree at in such a perfect way. It's almost like a symphony. I called it more of a perfect storm, I think, in the last video, but the way in which we just, each side disagrees so beautifully with the other, no matter what the action is. And we talked about the riots and the protests, whatever they are in Portland, and how it's so beautifully diametrically opposed, each view, right? The one side, these are beautiful protesters just fighting for racial equality peacefully, and these paramilitary federal agents are coming in and as stormtroopers and kidnapping them, and it's unbelievable. And then on the other side, it's the complete opposite. It's these are violent protesters who have been trying to take over the city for over a month, and throwing explosives and all this, and all these police officers or federal agents that are clearly federal agents are trying to do is protect other people and bring some safety into it. So you have that extreme divide. And what we talked about in the last video was some of the reasons for that. The way social media is set up, the way, and the root of it was, the root why answer, I think, was it's a perception issue. We're actually not that divided. We're being led by our minds, as well as some external inputs, to believe that we're super divided, but it's actually not representative of the real population. The mediums in which we see it, through the media or social media, or politicians speaking, all of those are flawed in some way, not necessarily intentionally, but they're flawed in some way that work almost perfectly with our brains that are looking for a cohesive narrative, and it leads us to believe that there's this huge divide when there may not be. So you get to that why, right? And then the next thing becomes, all right, what's the next level why? Same concept. So if we as a people, right, by and large, we've been through this. We've been doing this for a long time as a people, so we should have some experience and some savvy with this. You add on to that, this is anecdotal, obviously, but by and large, when I talk to people, they're all very aware of this and cognizant of this. The problems with social media, the problems with the media, the problems with politics. These aren't secrets. These aren't what you would traditionally see as a blind spot, right? Where it's just there's no knowledge of it. They think everything's working great. Almost everybody thinks everything is a disaster and things are working terribly, and social media is horrible for us as a country, and the media is so biased and just telling us what they want to tell us, and politicians are, not motivated to really do the right things anymore, and they're in, the pockets of corporations, whatever your beliefs are. Most people believe that there's a broken system. So that doesn't really line up, right? That next level why comes in and says, well, if people know this, why are they still letting it happen, right? If you're somewhat aware that this issue is here, what's the answer to that next level why of why it's happening? And I think that's the question we have to get to an answer to. We have to start to realize that and question ourselves on that. what is the thing that's pushing us to, it's not a blind spot, it's in front of our face, we're somewhat choosing to ignore it. Is it that it's almost being done so well that it's difficult to see it because it's the articulation of it is so perfect, that each side feels like such a threat from the other side, and that they're on such a moral high ground, and that they're so right that they can't see it. They could just see it in the other side and can't see it in themselves, right? Is that it? Is it that we've just been doing it for long enough and the hate has built up so much, and it's that fear and that hate and that certainty have overridden our rational thinking too far, right? It's gone too far in that way. It's difficult to say, but I think it's the answers that we need to get to. Again, we need to understand why in 2020 this thing finally seemed to, if you believe it, it's heading in that path, seems to be breaking, right? You've had hundreds of years of history, all sorts of controversy, from the earliest elections, all different types of social issues throughout history, the Civil War, obviously. There's been all different points like this. If this one truly is an inflection point, or if there is at least this anomaly that I've spoken about, this illogical point in time we're in where we're so absolutely divided, what's the why behind that? Again, what's causing that? What is it that's leading us to that now? We have to start to pick it out almost scientifically and see what is different. And not just about the dynamics, because you can identify that with things like social media. It's understanding what's different and why we can't see it, why we can't solve for it or get around it in any way. Why are we stuck in the midst of it and we seem helpless to do anything about it? So hopefully more to come on that as continue to think through it. But I think the concept, again, that next level wide concept, hopefully that kind of illustrates the importance of it, or why it might be interesting, and particularly in this topic where it feels like it's the critical question.